Hi. Welcome to Howdy Partner today. I'm Shardul Vaidya. Uh, Regular viewers of the show might notice that James is missing. That's because he's on vacation, but he will be back shortly. But today with me, I have my co-host Aniket. Please come on screen. Yeah, awesome.
Hey, Shardul, how are you?
I'm doing all right. So who do we have this week?
Oh, yeah. So we have a very interesting partner. They're called Zerto. They have a pretty interesting solution for disaster recovery. Um, so I think it's going to be an exciting show.
So you say disaster recovery. I mean, we're in the cloud. Why do we need disaster recovery?
Yes, that is actually a pretty good question. So disaster recovery, which I'm sure a lot of our viewers would know, is basically making sure how your solution will be up almost all of the time. But even though if you are in the cloud, you might not necessarily have migrated completely. So you could be slowly moving through from on-prem to the cloud, or you want to just back it up for your on-prem solution while you still have access to your on-prem. So disaster recovery is definitely crucial, be it within your cloud or be it from cloud to on-prem.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I think an important distinction between high availability and disaster recovery is that high availability is is something that the cloud will specialize in because you can have multiple instances running of the same thing, and there's load balancers and everything in the AWS service ecosystem that'll help you scale out quickly. But high availability doesn't mean disaster recovery.
Mhm.
You can still have AZ failures or well, we have high uptime, but we can still have AZ failures. But more importantly, uh, it's for our on-prem and migrating customers, or for customers who have on-prem data centers still and would like to have disaster recovery to on-prem or from on-prem. So to talk more about that, let's bring our guests in. We have Anthony from Zerto and Bob.
Alrighty. Hey, Anthony. Hi, Bob. How are
Hey,
you today, this Wednesday?
oh, very good, very good.
Doing well. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So you want to just give our viewers just a brief introduction about who you are and what your solution is?
Yeah, Bob, you want to kick it off? Or?
Sure. So I'm Bob Floyd. I'm the Global Alliance Architect with Zerto. I work primarily with with our partners, just like AWS. I'm the guy that's responsible for that relationship that we have with AWS, as well as the guy responsible for getting things into places like the AWS Marketplace.
Yeah. And hi, everybody. My name is Anthony Dutra. I am the nerd that Zerto hired to basically do everything AWS related, as well as just, try to be what's next in the newest technologies, particularly in the cloud, and from the AWS perspective. So very excited to be talking about DR, and with you guys today.
Awesome. So I think, yeah, I'm just out of for my own curiosity, I'm curious, and I'll pose the same question that Shardul posed. Why do we need DR?
Bob, you can kick it off, but
All right.
I'm passionate.
So, DR is one of those things that a lot of people confuse with backup, and it's not really backup, right? First of all, a little distinction, I guess, between DR and backup, right? Backup is that thing you have for compliance reasons. Backup is that thing you've got for auditing. DR is that thing that keeps your business going when some type of a disaster, be it man-made or natural, happens, right? When I say man-made, we're talking about things like ransomware or maybe a denial of service attack on your data center. There's a lot of different things that could happen there. A natural meteor falls out of the sky and your data center turns into a literal smoking hole, right? Uh, and what do you do? We've got customers out there who very honestly tell us that every hour they're down is $1 million or $2 million of revenue up in smoke, right? So back to the concept of DR versus backup.
Yeah.
Backup may be a day old, 12 hours old in terms of your data. Maybe it's even a week old. You know, I mean, it just kind of depends on what your, you know, what your backup cycle is, right? DR in the Zerto world means we're going to bring you back up in
Seconds.
in minutes with a data loss of seconds, right? An RPO
Right.
in the business RPO of seconds and an RTO of minutes. So
No, exactly to Bob's point, and that's the difference between like operational recovery and like coming back from backups, right? So with Zerto, what you're doing is coming back seconds, minutes before that disaster actually happened, EC2 instance or a VM itself, and you have flexibility when it comes to where you recover from. So if you want to recover from the cloud or you want to recover from on premise, Zerto kind of gives you that flexibility. But the difference between DR and backup is really that granularity of recovery. So that's where a lot of people see the difference between Zerto and then a backup strategy.
Okay, I think we have one question
Awesome.
on the chat. I think we pretty much answered it, but if you guys want to answer it further.
Yeah, I don't know much about cloud data. If something happens to the cloud, how many redundancies are in place? Sorry if this is a dumb question. It's really not, right? So, like you guys have mentioned high availability from the start of this, right? So, obviously, when you're a cloud architect, you want to design for that high availability, but mainly that's in the same. In order for it to be truly highly available, it needs to be geographically within the same area that's serving, you know, your customers or the application itself. So what AWS does really well, you know, you want to set up high availability within your application. Let's say it's an EC2 instance, and you want to set up like, I don't know, like scale sets in order to scale out in case something crashes. Then absolutely, right? That is perfectly meant for that kind of strategy. What DR comes in is, all right, well, our instance got attacked at 10 o'clock. I need to roll back all the way to, or 9:50, or even sooner to 9:59. Now that we're in the cloud, we need to be as close to as real time as possible, and that's kind of the difference between like DR and backup and from the AWS perspective, you know, high availability itself.
To dig a little bit into that, in terms of redundancies with Zerto, you've got the option to replicate each VM up to 3 separate places. So you could have 3 separate redundancies, right? In terms of your production environment. Let's say I'm running production inside AWS. I could back it up to 3 separate regions, 3 different ACs. I could back it up to 2 regions and an on-prem data center. Right, there are a lot of different ways I could go about doing it, but with Zerto licensing up to 3 different redundancies.
Yeah, and it's a lot easier to fail over your EC2 instances to like California than it is to have to back it up and then bring it all back online. So that's that's why.
Awesome. I think we have a unique viewer request. What does Anthony? What does your
What does
shirt?
my shirt say? All right, here we go. All right, so mine says
sweet.
disaster. Yeah, we both got them. Yep, and they are very popular. Obviously, for reasons they are quite controversial, but every time we go to shows, people like them. So
yeah, these are huge trade show things. I was lucky enough to get to go to reInvent in Vegas in November, right? And I don't know, there was crazy numbers, right? 45 or 50,000 people there for reInvent. We blew through like a dozen boxes of t-shirts. I mean, it was like 1,500 or 2,000 t-shirts and nothing flat. So, and they were everywhere, right? They're super comfortable. I sound like I'm pimping the t-shirt, but
no.
I was like, oh, another t-shirt. And then I put it on and I went, all right, we spent good money on this, but
I think it just highlights the solution that we have.
Yeah, it does. If you want to be in control of your disaster recovery, this is it. So.
Alrighty. So should we get started with the solution? And if you want to talk about what exactly we'll be seeing today.
Yeah. So let me see if I can switch screens. So on the screen we see the Zerto the desktop, right?
Yep.
Yep.
All right,
Absolutely,
awesome.
sir.
So before we get into it, again, there's going to be not presentation, but just a little bit of an architecture standpoint. It's going to be very nerdy. So if you guys are into nerdy stuff, this is going to be the Twitch stream for you. What we're talking about here, again, I'm going to show this in real time, but what I want to do is give everybody a visual of what exactly we're doing in this demo, because it definitely helps. So what we're doing today is if you're on premise, and your customer, if you're a AWS SA particularly, you're just very much interested in the Amazon space as a sysadmin, or I don't know, somebody that deals with data center on day-to-day basis. This is kind of the architecture diagram that you're going to look at. And from a Zerto perspective, this is what we do and what we provision in order to set up from on-premise to migrate or DR status from on-premise to the cloud. So we're going to basically walk through today a vCenter environment. What you have to spin up when you start this process is basically the full Zerto suite on-premise. So you're going to provision what's called the ZVM. The ZVM is basically a virtual manager that does what you'll see through the demo, all of the GUI interface, and then the VRA, which is doing much of the replication stuff itself. So in AWS itself, what we do is we replicate natively to AWS. So again, you're not using a VMware as a service in AWS. You're actually replicating from on-premise to native AWS architectures. So that's exactly what I'm going to do throughout this full demo itself. And I just wanted to give everybody a visualization to what that looked like overall. So we're going to, yep.
Oh, just
Yep.
you're saying you migrate to native AWS, but what's the other option? Like, could you maybe have some kind of emulator in the cloud? Would you even suggest that?
No, so there's no emulation in the cloud. There's no, I guess, pretending that it's going to be in AWS. It's going to be a full replication from on-premise to AWS architecture and everything like that. Even when we do failover tests, it's going to use native AWS stuff. So what that means is you're like truly, from a DR perspective, moving to the cloud, and then from a migration perspective, also doing the same thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
All
Yeah,
right,
we're moving your VMware virtual machines to EC2 instances.
facts. Yeah, that's real. Yeah. So,
All right, fair, yeah.
yep.
Sorry, just have a follow-up question, because this sounds pretty interesting. I'm just trying to understand how exactly this would work. So in terms of the network bandwidth or the security of the backup, or the solution, because it's backing up from an on-prem solution to the cloud, for our security-centric viewers, how secure would this be? How would you say?
Oh, very much so, because what we're doing is using AWS Direct Connect, or like a VPN to connect from on-premise to the cloud. So we're using your services in order to do the actual replication to the cloud itself. So the same level of security and expectation from that perspective, we're just using natively itself.
Awesome. So it's
Take
not
it a step further. To take it a step further, we can encrypt the data inside that direct connect network stream or VPN stream. So everything's covered multiple times.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's not over the public internet. So I think this creates a
Yeah. That would be a huge problem for sure.
Yeah.
So, all right. So I showed the actual diagram of, all right, we're on premise today. We're ready to use DR to the cloud to do so. And what we're doing is basically logging into the Zerto production page. So on premise today, we have, like I showed before, the VRA installed on our ESXi hosts. we have basically Zerto set up from a VM perspective. So this Zerto VM page is its own thing. So if we're looking, so vSphere local.
And so while Anthony's logging in there, to take it a step further, right, the ZVM, Zerto Virtual Manager, actually lives in one relationship with your vSphere install. And then the VRAs, which are a hardened appliance and run as a virtual machine, live in a one-to-one relationship with your ESX hosts that are controlled by vSphere. So if you've got 20 hosts in a particular vSphere install, you have one ZVM and 20 VRAs.
Right, exactly. So on premise, we have basically this here, right? We have our own VRA installed ESXi host, basically has Zerto installed on premise. And then in the cloud, we have what's called the ZCA, which we can connect to and then replicate to and start our major process over.
So
For some of the folks,
ZCA is short for Zerto Cloud Appliance. That's actually just the DVM and the VRA rolled into one machine to save you a little bit in terms of compute costs, right?
Right.
Yeah,
So-
real quick before we continue, we have a question in chat. Can we have a basic understanding of what Zerto does? And can we just like roll back for a second and do a 5-10 second rundown on what the solution is? Yeah.
Yeah.
You want it, Anthony?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, if you want to think about Zerto, it is basically DVR for your EC2 instances. What you can do is, or VMs, you can roll back to a very specific point in time before a failure has happened or something has happened to your instance, and you can roll back very granularly to seconds before actually something happened. Overall.
So you used the DVR analogy, and you did say seconds. So what's the granularity of this replication?
Yeah, basically from 5 minutes to literally, we have customers reporting back to us seconds of DVR like rollback. So it's just like it's not necessarily stuck to minutes or hours of recovery.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not sure I know the term DVR. Can you just explain what that is?
Yeah. So back in the day, we used to have this thing called TiVo, and we used to be able to roll back to like literally minutes before. Actually, you can roll back to a specific point in time on your TV.
Yeah.
Yeah. Still today.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So same thing, but from the like IT enterprise perspective, and that's a huge deal because operationally, you don't want to roll back 4 hours, 5 hours before something happened. So to have this and to have it in a dashboard and easily to use is very interesting. All right. So I am logged into my on-premise ZVM instance. Basically, what this means is if you're a AWS SA and you're talking to somebody, you basically have somebody that's on-premise and looking to desperately move to the cloud, whether that's from a DR perspective or that's from a migration perspective. So Zerto is going to be able to basically set all of that up for you. What we start with is this. Actually, let me pull it up. So you on premise install what's called the Zerto ZVMA, and you'll basically in your customer's VMware environment download this file, and then you'll be able to get this dashboard on the screen that you see here in order to replicate to AWS itself. So what we're going to do in this first realm is basically take the on-premise environment and then replicate up into AWS itself. So what I'm doing now is basically going to pull up the AWS version of the Zerto on-premise architecture, right? So you spin up a ZCA within AWS itself. It gives you a full dashboard of failing over, failing back, replicating between both sites. And then you're able to move from on-premise into the cloud itself. So while we do that, let me pull up the actual. Yep.
While we do that, just a quick question. So you mentioned that essentially the DR solution will basically back up your on-prem VMs, in this case CVM, to the AWS EC2 instances, which is our version of uh, virtual machines. So do you need to have any instances already spinning up, or does it automatically create that?
Actually, let me pull that up.
Yeah. So while Anthony's digging for that, no, we're not going to have anything spun up. Just move the data to start with to save on compute costs. So the data will be stored in S3. And when you do a failover, we will spin up the EC2 instances automatically. That's all orchestrated and automatic within the GUI. The EC2 instances come up. We rehydrate the data from S3 into an EBS disk and attach that to the EC2 instance, and you're off and running.
That's awesome.
Yeah, very much so. So basically, this kind of small EC2 instance here is just like the jump box into what we actually get to install. So once you download from the marketplace, you come up here and you actually get to jump into the administrative tab itself. So and then you can log in from the ZCA itself to this disaster recovery sort of platform. So basically what we're going to do in this first one is pair the two sites. So we have a on-premise VMware environment with everything from you need to set up in order to replicate to the cloud, and then we're going to log into the cloud itself. So
So while we're doing that, I see I can share some resources that like some links or blogs that talk about AWS Zerto for AWS datasheet, or extended journal for copy with S3.
yes, so there's two kind of ways that we can actually log in and actually replicate to the cloud. The first one is so this way, where we're going to do where we're going to actually pair the two sites together, and then we're going to, in this case, replicate a file system from on-premise to an S3 bucket, and then recover from it. So what we've done right now is basically log into the main ZCA site. So what this was from an SA perspective, if I was a AWS right now, I would basically log into AWS. I would create from an AMI this new ZCA instance, M5X large, and then I would bring it online, log in, and then we're going to actually replicate between both of from on-premise to the actual site itself. So let me log in here. So we're going to pair both sides. So from this time, we're going to pair. We're going to take our on-premise site, basically the IP address of this, click copy, paste, and then from our production site, right, especially if they have Zerto already, we're going to go to sites, click pair. Click generate pairing token, click copy. Okay. All right. So now what we've done right now is literally pair from on-premise this VMware vSphere environment to AWS cloud itself. And what we did was use in the EC2 instance that we see right here, the ZCA.
So do you have to have an instance running in the cloud, or is this something that can be brought up on an ad hoc basis?
You do have to have the instance running in the cloud itself. So basically, the ZCA, as Bob has mentioned, is going to be from the marketplace overall. But you're going to have that running. It's software only, straight from the marketplace, and you can roll it, and then you you scale it out as such. So
Yeah, wait, ZCA is not in the marketplace yet. Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
We're getting there, but not quite yet. The day's coming. And I should point out, you want this. You've got to have an instance up and running all the time, because Zerto functions on a concept called continuous data protection, or CDP. Right? And CDP is one of those things. We're protecting everything as it's being written. So as your users on premise are writing data to whatever VM, be it a database, be it a file server, it doesn't make any difference what it is. If it's under Zerto protection, as those writes are being created by the user, we're replicating them to the cloud, to your AWS environment, which is how we get a 5-second RPO or 10-second RPO or 15, so whatever it ends up being. That's not something you said. I guess we should probably say that Zerto is best effort. So you're going to get RPOs as low as they can possibly be with your VMs, as long as Zerto's got a connection. Which is why you've got to have an instance in the cloud, right? Something's got to be there to handle that data when it comes in, Shardul.
Understandable,
So,
yeah.
Bob, again, I'm pretty new to this, and I think we have a lot of viewers coming in. So one of the questions that popped in, and you mentioned RPO and RTO. The question is, what is one of the fundamental ideas for DR? And I'm not sure what RPO, RTO is. Do you want to expand
so-
what exactly it is?
RPO and RTO. So we'll start with RPO. RPO is, oh man, and now I'm drawing a complete blank.
recovery point objective.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Anthony. My mind just went totally blank. Yeah, recovery point objective. So effectively, that is that's the amount of time that's how quick you can recover to. So if your time is 10 o'clock and your recovery point objective is 15 minutes, that means you would recover back to 9:45. In most cases, RPOs are going to be expressed in your SLAs with in terms of whoever's handling your DR, whether it's internal or whether it's an external company that you work with for that. Your SLA is going to be 1 hour, 30 minutes, whatever is going to be your RPO, right? And that means that is the amount of data you're potentially losing. And so when Zerto says we've got an RPO of 5 seconds to 1 hour or whatever, that means you may only lose 5 seconds of data. RTO is recovery time objective, and what that means is time to back up and running. So if everything fails at 10 a.m., you could, RTO is how long it takes from 10 a.m. to get back up and running. Is that 30 minutes? Is that 20 minutes? Is that an hour? I may not be doing a great job of adequately explaining RPO.
No, I think I understand it. So I think if I understand it correctly, the goal is to have as minimum values for both of these as possible.
Yes, lower values are good. Exactly. It's like golf, right? You want a lower score.
Yeah.
A fun fact, Zerto is actually short for zero RTO.
That's what
it came from. Yeah.
That's awesome.
To get any faster than Zerto in terms of disaster recovery, you've got to be doing synchronous replication, which requires exactly the same hardware on both ends of your connection. It is ridiculously expensive to have synchronous replication. We refer to Zerto as near synchronous replication.
That's awesome. I did not know about the naming behind, the reasoning behind the name.
I worked here for 9 months before anybody explained it to me. So it's hey. Oh, that's you guys putting blog stuff in for definitions. How cool. Thank you. The blogs probably explain it better than I did. I'm not used to explaining it. But it's a fair question.
Yeah, I think it's the fundamental of DR. So it's helps to understand why we are doing what we're doing.
Right. All right, boys. So
Where are we?
basically, yes, yeah, we're fine. We're fine, Bob. So now we've paired basically on-premise to AWS. So after that struggle, we can see for sure that, hey, we're in our VMware environment. We have some VMs that we really care about that we want to either DR to the cloud or migrate to the cloud. And now what we want to do with them is basically pair the two sites. So we have a EC2 instance running in the cloud, AWS, basically a Windows instance saying that, hey, I'm connecting to my on-premise AWS EC2, my VM instance. And now we want to replicate to one another. So what we're going to start with, now that we've finally paired the two sites together, is the creation of a VPG. Now the VPG is the essence of what, I don't know, kind of drives Zerto itself. It's called a virtual protection group. And what we're doing in this virtual protection group is basically setting up a DR strategy in case something happens. So what we want to do is say AWS, let's say VPG itself. What we're doing in the priority tab is telling Zerto, hey, from a network perspective, I want you to start with this VPG first or this VPG first. If you're trying to find the sort of QoS sort of approach, this is the tab to kind of kick this off. So what we want from this perspective is to say, hey, this AWS, what our failover to AWS is going to be high priority, and let's start from there. So the VM instance that we're going to protect is like a little small social media application. It's like a blog site. We can't log into it, but basically what we're doing from this page here is saying from the Zerto UI, hey, I want to, you already recognize all the VMs on premise for me. Why don't you choose one that you want to put in this VPG group, and I will protect it down to the second or minutes that we're looking to add to this sort of protection group in this DR strategy. So we're able to bring that new VM over. And if we wanted to actually, from what Bob was talking about earlier, the one to many perspective, we can replicate it from here to another on-premise site, here to AWS to on-premise at many different times. So that's what kind of makes Zerto very unique in that DR sort of strategy overall. So continuing on, we're going to say, hey, where do we want to replicate to? We want to replicate to AWS, and we want what is our proprietary main selling point is our journal, right? Our journal can go from 1 all the way up to 30 days of data. Obviously, the more you put in there, the more it's going to store and run up your cost. But it's nice to know that you can literally protect for 30 days down to the second what you want in terms of from on-premise to an EC2 instance. So we start. Let's go for like 1 day. An RPO target alert is basically saying, hey, you fell below this point in time. What can I do in order to make it up? So you get alerted to be like, hey, let's adjust this VPG. Let's see what is a better strategy going forward. And then you can be reminded to test your actual failover itself, at certain points in times. So this is on the next screen. Again, it's all GUI driven, so you don't have to worry about anything. What volume you want to protect, as well as this is called a volume sync type. So a continuous sync is basically the first initial sync. We're going to push whatever that VM is, all that IO, to an EC2 instance, and we're going to say, hey, there's going to be 1 for 1 to wherever that is. And then once we do that initial push all the way through, we're going to keep updating through the journal whatever those changes are within that EC2 instance itself. You can do an initial sync only. Hey, I just want a backup of wherever the heck this is from on-premise to the public cloud. Let's do it that way, or just no sync itself. Hey, let's make this connection and let's see what happens from there. But obviously, the majority of people choose continuous initial sync. We go next. This is where you set up the networking for the majority of your just like AWS provisioning itself. So you're going to choose everything from the VPG, the subnet, the security group, the instance type, the instance family. So what that means is you have some form of customization when you're trying to bring this application back up online, but you don't, you're stuck within whatever this is. So from our perspective, we only care about like restoring this crappy little VM to like a T3 large, right? Whatever. There's other scripts that you can set up within Zerto itself. So let's say you have a customer that the VM comes back online and needs to download these different, binaries or projects within that VM itself. Not projects, but things within that VM itself. You can actually put a path to the script itself or parameters that you want to set, and you can do that within Zerto. This is the other biggest part of Zerto that a lot of individuals like, especially from the SA perspective, that makes your job a lot easier. So failover IP as well as test IP. So test is strictly for, hey, I'm going to do a failover test. I want to see if this VM comes back online, how many seconds it takes, blah, blah, blah. You can set the IP address for it here. Just click that little button. Or you can do the same thing for within the live failover, right? I want this instance to have a IP address of this. I can set it here, and it's a private IPv4 public IP address. But in this case, we're not going to do that. So this is a nice summary screen at the end of all of it. Basically, it says what's the name of the VPG, what are you expecting from it. When we recover, this is what the instance is going to look like, and you can just see what it looks like from the library test failover overall. I'm going to go click done. So any other questions up to this point, or?
Yeah, I actually had a quick question. Why is there a separation between test and live?
Yes.
Yeah, so test and live is great, right? There's a number one, you want to do a test failover on a regular basis because you want to make sure that the data you're capturing is actually good, right? A DR strategy is awesome, but if you don't test your DR strategy, how do you know you're actually protected? And that's one of the great things about Zerto is we've built the ability to test it right in. And you want to separate the two things because you don't want to impact production. So you want to run your test spin up, your test failover in its own separate little sandbox that's away from your production network. So it's not going to impact your production network in any way, shape, or form, which offers you some fun possibilities, right? Like development. I started my career in the IT world in dev, and we had a completely separate set of servers and a whole nother environment in the dev world that we had to hang on to and keep up with, and make it had to mirror what was going on in production, right? It was a nightmare for my MIS department because they were constantly trying to maintain two different networks. With this, you don't necessarily have to do that. If your development team wants to test changes to your application, you can spin up the production version of the VPG on AWS, do your tests in a sandbox environment with live data, the existing current code, see what's going on with it, and when you're done with it, spin it back down. You don't have to maintain a completely separate set of hardware, a whole other data center, whatever it is that's required for this. And that's just one possibility. Patch Tuesday. How many of us have screwed up a server on Patch Tuesday, right? You can spin this whole environment up and apply all the security updates to your servers and see what it does to your application before you do it in production.
Right. Yeah, we'll do that live for sure, and that's again the major benefit overall, right? The fact that you're able to test and what a lot of people that we speak to like is the seconds or like the time it takes to recover from on-premise to the cloud itself. So I'll do a eventual test failover during this demo, but we'll generate a report from that. That's a PDF that a lot of sysadmins or just people that want to prove that this works, they have it for them. So well, after this initial sync, we'll see a lot of the actual DR or operational recovery that happens from it. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I can have a quick question. So I don't know if I saw like you chose a particular AWS region um, to back it up to, but if you did, can I back it up to multiple regions at the same time?
Yes. So it really depends on where the ZCA lives.
Okay.
As long as you have a ZCA within that particular region, then you can do whatever. You can replicate to it. In this case, we're in the North Virginia region, and this is our small little ZCA for our lab instance. So once that actually starts finishing up, we'll do some real life replication from on premise to that secondary site to actually AWS. So we're actually moving from there. But for now, what we're going to do is set up the S3 bucket as and Bob, I need to get you for this because this is what I don't know. It's not backup. It's literally not a sort of backup strategy. It's what we're doing is extending our journal into the AWS S3 bucket. And then, like, if you're protecting a file system, for example, you're able to recover from that point in time that you push off that retention set too. So what I'm going to do right now is set up a repository. We have natively for AWS this S3 sort of option. And all we care about is basically let me push this. Let me push this down. I have a little file system on here, right? So a lot of us kind of get that, like, all right, we save to ourselves locally, and we have like a ton of PDFs or something that we save to our files. And for like the IT guy, imagine if you could kind of take these files, push them off to an S3 bucket, and then at that point in time, then if I don't know, I deleted the Gorilla Guide to continuous backup, I could bring it back down like just like that. And that's kind of what Zerto allows us to do with this LTR kind of backup sort of feature. So what I'm going to do is jump into it, right? We're going to connect to an S3 bucket. So we're going to create a new repository. We're going to just say the S3 protocol, which thank God for 17 years of it. And basically call the AWS repo. We're going to call the AWS repo. I didn't know. So I got my first AWS SA certification back in 2017. S3 was not regional. It was global back in the day. So this is kind of new to me, but we have the choice to say, hey, your bucket in this region, you can choose it. We have, in this case, a bucket set up in US East 1. For other S3 compatible sort of buckets, you can say what URL it is, but I have a predefined bucket name that I'm working with. So we have in our AWS console this bucket here, and I will jump into it just so you guys can see it. All right, let's go to S3.
So while we're doing that, I think we have a few questions in the chat.
Yeah, hit me.
Go for it.
So the first one is the data sheet says it can migrate hundreds of VMs at a time.
Yes.
That's good.
Yes. Go ahead, Bob.
Awesome.
So one of the things that we probably glossed over a little bit is that Zerto is agentless and it functions at scale, right? We work at the hypervisor layer. So you don't have to go through all of your various VMs and install some type of agent in order to back it up, in order to replicate it. Let's use the term replication because I don't want to back up and right? So I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want anybody calling me from Israel later and letting me know that I screwed that up. So you don't have to install an agent to do replication, right? Replication happens it's a block level replication that happens at the hypervisor layer. We're tied into the hypervisor via API, both on-prem and in the cloud. And we're just going to move the data, right? Each little bit. And because we are just moving the data, the fresh data, after initial sync, you can move hundreds of VMs at one time with the click of a button if that's what you want to do.
That's
Full
impressive.
migration from on-prem to in the cloud and be up and running in AWS in a matter of minutes.
Awesome.
So yeah, man.
I see access keys and secret keys being used. When's the plan to migrate to IAM roles?
Yeah.
Is this 2018?
Oh, I will forward your question to my product management team, sir, and allow them to answer that.
I wish we had that power, Bob. Yeah. Yeah, man. I think there's a lot of evolution still to this project itself. I am hard pressed to find anything else that kind of does the same thing. So yeah, I feel that.
So I think we have another question. Does Zerto DR solution utilize any of the AWS MGN, which stands for Migration or DMS, Database Management Service, migration service, or some combination of it, or all of it?
No, this is all proprietary to ourselves. And even if I mean, I brought it up because I have the deck ready, but like from failing over into AWS or to AWS, we've coded everything from our perspective. So like you're using native AWS resources, we're not using anything that is necessarily part of that architecture itself. We've built a lot of it ourselves.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay, and that's still up on the screen. All right. So what I've shown everybody now, what we're doing is super cool. Is basically taking a file system. All right. So you're a sysadmin. Karen loves her, file system that she has saved locally. You want to, it's obviously she's running on a VM instance. You want to take this and push it off to AWS S3 bucket. What we're doing with Zerto is basically allowing you to do that, but you have to first set up a little index on premise and then tell Zerto itself your credentials for S3 in order to put all the data in there. Now, from a ransomware perspective, what our claim to fame is the fact that we can actually trigger immutability from our dashboard itself. So if you are in the compliance field or are trying to basically store data that, hey, we don't want it changed or altered ever, you're able to do so through Zerto and into the S3 bucket and tell S3, hey, we don't want this data altered when we push it to there. So that's huge because basically you're allowed to that flexibility to easily do so from on-premise. And then from a archiving perspective, super huge. You can actually set that here, what storage class you want your S3 bucket and for you to push these journal copies into. So, after 30 days, I want to put it into S3 standard IA storage. And then after 120 days, I want to put it in the Glacier. And I best not access it because it's going to cost me. So it's just like we're able to do so from the Zerto dashboard, and that makes, from a backup perspective, hey, what do I want to do with this data? It gives me options in order to be very flexible in how I put it in the cloud itself. So we're not going to enable immutability particularly because I won't be able to delete it, and my manager will kill me. And then we'll, I guess, put that there.
So Just a quick one on immutability, because this sounds really interesting. So can no one just ever change the data in the S3?
Right. Right. If you actually set this to make following attention sets mutable, it'll take the Zerto journal that it pushes off into the S3 bucket, as well as any files that you say, hey, I want it in the S3 bucket. It'll say, I don't want this to be changed ever. And then if a change is made, it'll just create a new record, and storage grows from there. So yes, it won't. It will actually be very impactful if you click that.
This is a great feature for fighting ransomware.
Yep.
Right? Once you've made a retention set immutable, ransomware can't touch it. So let's say you're doing DR for 7 days, and at the end of 7 days, you're pushing that journal set into an immutable S3 bucket. At the very least, if you get hit with ransomware and you're not 100% certain where it has started, what it has impacted, you know that 7 days ago, you backed up a retention set in an immutable copy that can't be touched. Worst case scenario, you're just missing a few days, and you can roll back to that, right?
Right. And you need to have Zerto already set up, and you can, so we'll click save. And what we'll do is we'll see that not only this connection, as long as I don't mess up, absolutely take place. But if we go to AWS itself, and let's restart this. Right, we'll see the repository config, and what we'll see is like it's going to be /backup. It's going to be a lot of folders that start populating. That Zerto allows you to recover from. So, yep.
For you S3 geeks out there, we're making use of native S3 functionality. We're calling the object lock.
Don't even get me started.
Yeah.
I have done. Yeah.
No, I just wanted to ask. I mean, fundamentally, I think your laptops or your VM's file system is different than how S3 looks at files. S3 is an object store inherently. So how does Zerto navigate that difference? How does it transform files, or like?
So it's not like you're going to your boss is going to get Zerto, and then you have like this ultimate like search bar that's going to get you any file that you push off through an S3 bucket. Unfortunately, what it is like we're literally pushing off the Zerto journal to the S3 bucket, and what we're saying is that point in time, wherever the heck is in that VPG, you can recover from. So it's like it's not a true backup. You need to have Zerto on premise, and whatever to recover from. But it's not like to your point like a true backup. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're not going to recover from the S3 bucket and come back online. Like, it's going to look like.
You can't go to the S3 bucket and find the files manually. You've got to do it through the Zerto interface. We're going to instruct things on the fly on the back end, right?
Yeah.
Because what we're doing is we're setting checkpoints in the journal at specific points in time, and we're going to pull the data associated with that checkpoint and reconstitute it.
Right. So if we go here, right, what we're doing is this is a local WinFS sort of replication, right? We're using Zerto to replicate this small file system on premise with all these different files. I basically just set up a repository and I said, hey, Zerto, AWS has this bucket that we can use in order to push off a very specific copy of this file system too, but it needs your journal while you do it. So what we're doing is we're going into the actual local file system itself, right? That's protected by Zerto. We're going to say actions and edit. Let's go back. Edit VP. Edit VPG. And then we now call it extended journal copy, but back in the day, it was like a long-term retention thing. So we click this, immediate release off. We say what repo we want it indexed, what we want it to shoot it off to. On premise, just to let everybody know, we have a what's called the indexer. So hey, it's a small file system that's basically keeping track of where the heck everything is going to. If you're only going to AWS, not that big of a deal. You click VM settings. You say, hey, we have an indexer. We want to push this off the AWS S3 bucket. This is where it is. Click apply. And then you can actually set from a scheduling perspective when and where you want this. So right now we like to do daily incrementals. Like it's a backup, but it's not, right? You're pushing off the journal, you're pushing off the copy of that VM itself, all the files to an S3 bucket, and you want to recover from it whenever the heck you want. So you have this option to schedule when you want to push off to it, whenever that is best for you. So
we designed as a function of convenience and security, right? It's not designed as some type of a compliance backup. Zerto should be used in conjunction with a real backup solution for long-term compliance, where you've got to keep 7 years worth of stuff, right? Because LTR is only good for a year at this point in time.
Right. All right. So we've basically said, hey, this VM that is a local Windows file system, we want to push it off to an S3 bucket. We've run what's called, we basically tagged it as saying, hey, we want LTR on it, and we're going to run what's called a retention process. So this is a manual backup to the S3 bucket itself. And it's from Zerto, we're going to say, okay, and it's going to push it off to the bucket. Now, what does that look like as it does so? Of course. Yeah, why not? All right. Well, I'm going to log back into that, but
get out your two-factor authentication.
We've had an Okta problem. Let's be open about that.
So I have a question here. So up until now, we've been deploying this whole DR solution, from the UI, which is very intuitive. But for the developer centric community, is there any way to do it programmatically as well?
Yeah. Yes, the Zerto built API first.
Yeah.
You sounded like you wanted to jump in, Anthony. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, it is very programmatically. You are able to jump into it. Do you want to necessarily out the gate? No, right? You want to kind of be part of it. Oops.
But yeah, you can call just about all the functions within it from some type of an external program. You want to run it from ServiceNow, right? You want to tie it back to tickets, that type of thing. There are a lot of different ways that you can go about doing it, but yeah, and there's a tremendous number of APIs that you can tie into, and trigger failovers, watch consumption, data sizes, the whole bit. Run your reports. Yep.
Yeah, because I think creating an automated end-to-end pipeline is one of the use cases I can see, to basically have a complete failover without doing too much configurations through the UI.
Right. Yeah. So now most of the failover is largely automated and orchestrated within Zerto. And a lot of that, you saw Anthony go through and set up that virtual protection group to begin with, right? Typically, you're going to put VMs that are all associated with a specific application in a given VPG, right? So that you're bringing that application up as one single unit. And when you build that VPG, as you saw Anthony do with the wizard, you're building in most of the orchestration and automation. We're getting to the point where Anthony can show you a failover here in a second. And when you see that failover, you'll see how quick and easy it is. And that's because you configured nearly everything up front. when you built that VPG, right down to and including things like your boot order. So, a lot of applications expect to have the database there and waiting so the application can make that connection when it comes up. And if the application comes up and tries to connect to the database and the database isn't there, it freaks out. So you want your database server to come up first. You would specify that in your boot order, and then you would bring your application server up last so that everything is in place for the application server to make its connections to during failover. All that is set up in your initial configuration of the VPG, and then failover becomes a matter of just clicking a couple of buttons.
Oh, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So that is extremely super helpful. And then, so as you can see, we're kind of already running to that S3 bucket overall. So pull it up, right? So you can see the backups, images. So we're running to that S3 bucket. Now, from an operational perspective, that's all, that's all pretty great. But what we want to do is, like to Bob's point, is just fail over from here to actually AWS itself. So let's create a checkpoint of while that's actually writing the local file system up to the S3 bucket. Let's create a checkpoint that says, hey, from this point in time, we want this social network site to roll back and recover from. We'll say okay, and then we're going to add that to the actual process itself. So we can do multiple things as we start to manage our DR strategy, and we can, aside from just push off a file system to AWS S3 bucket, we can start actually failing over and testing that process itself. So let's try. So we create a checkpoint, and now we're going to start a failover test from that checkpoint.
So what does creating a checkpoint actually do? Does it
Yeah,
just
let's show you right.
just puts a snapshot in place essentially?
Yeah, that's what's kind of cool. It just like tags a particular point in time that we already have. So it's the all available checkpoints. You can see that
Every
literally
5 seconds.
literally 5 seconds. Like that's why it's hard not to demo this because it's so easy to roll back to a point in time. And then if we were to just say like test, like where we want to roll back to, this is the point in time. We can just search for it.
Yeah, so this is particularly useful. I mentioned Patch Tuesday a second ago. This is particularly useful if, for example, I'm patching servers. I can go in and set a manual checkpoint pre-patch. Then I go about my patching business. If something happens and I've got to roll back, I know exactly where to roll back to. I don't have to go hunting for my checkpoint. I know where I started the process.
And then add on top of that, if you have multiple instances, a boot order. Hey, to Bob's point, my DB needs to come up first before the front end comes up. Let's script that there. And then if you have any actual custom scripts, you can add them to the dashboard itself. So like literally, this is what a failover test looks like. You click start failover test. And what we're going to see here, let's kill this. Let's see the actual failover itself. So starting the failover test. So again, right, you're an SA. You have a customer that is on premise today. They're very curious about AWS itself. Literally set up Zerto and just migrate it to the cloud or start filling over to the cloud. You can do all of this stuff without actual too much bothering of what is going on in your production environment today. So.
Awesome. Yeah, for those of our viewers who are just joining, we have Anthony and Bob from Zerto who are showing their DR solution. I believe we were just in the process of backing everything up to S3 in a matter of seconds.
Yeah. So there's two kind of things going on. The first one is we're taking a file system backing it up to S3 bucket itself and saying, hey, in case something happens, we'll call it down from that point in time. And then we're doing some operational stuff. So we're actually saying from on-premise to AWS itself, we're setting up a failover test. So this social media site that we have on premise, we want to fail it over to the public cloud and see how that looks. So we're actually testing the failover live itself, and you can see in real time that kind of what's going on.
Yeah, and we should stress once again that all this functionality is available if you're running your production site in AWS too, right? We can fail over to another AC, we can fail over to another region. If you're running production out of Northern Virginia, US East, we could fail over to Frankfurt. If you want to get completely out of the country, we could fail over to another AC inside the same region. Doesn't matter. We can do all of this both to, from, and in AWS.
Just create a foolproof solution.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like it does quite a bit. It's particularly from the operational perspective. It's just like you can't not beat the this sort of time frame where we're doing the demo in order to recover from. So once that actually comes over, we'll see both the AWS VPG, right?
Mhm.
Operational recovery from a test perspective. I'll generate the report. I'll show you like what that looks like and how many seconds all that took, and then the running the retention process. So again, for those out there, we're basically taking a file system on premise and then running it off to an S3 bucket, basically replicating it to there. And then if we want to recover from it, we can just tell Zerto to, hey, bring it back down, and I want these files to do so.
So actually, I noticed because you had to deploy ZCA into AWS.
Yeah.
Does the kind of instance you deploy ZCA on affect how many operations you can perform simultaneously?
Yeah, because we actually recommend like an M5XL large instance. The amount of IOPS going through Zerto itself can be quite significant, but that's why we have in place kind of these prerequisites in order to start it up.
During failover, in fact, you can probably pull it up and show it in the dashboard. During a failover event like we're doing now, we actually spin up helper VMs to handle the rehydration of the data from S3.
So because you're compressing the data as it goes into S3 and you have to unpack it into EBS volumes, right?
Correct. Yeah, we've got to pull it out of S3 and put it in an EBS volume before we can attach it to the EC2 instance that we spin up at the end. Yep. And so we spin up what we call a Z importer, which is like a helper VM that's going to work with the ZCA in terms of moving that data, unpacking it, and hydrating it into an EBS volume.
Yeah, to people in chat, we threw out a lot of acronyms right now. EBS is Elastic Block Storage. It's how EC2 instances store data locally. It kind of emulates your computer's file system. S3 is, of course, the secure storage solution, and EC2 is VMs in the cloud, or VMs in AWS specifically.
Yeah. All right. I was worried this was going to take not enough time, but yeah, this is very much from our perspective what recovery looks like, what going back and forth from on-premise to the public cloud, particularly AWS, looks like. So it's very much GUI driven. If I could, yeah.
If you want to throw up your AWS console and Zerto console side by side, and we can.
Yeah, I also want to say that the monitoring dashboard is fabulous. Like you can see every kind of detail that you want to understand about, like what kind of RPO was made for this DR solution. Gather those metrics. I think that's a fabulous dashboard.
Yeah, and that's actually just what you can see inside the Zerto instance. We also do reporting back to Zerto Analytics, and you can get to Zerto Analytics separately, and that'll show you even more information. It'll also give you a planner inside Zerto Analytics for determining what your DR site needs to look like. So if you're trying to, to estimate what you're going to need to use inside AWS right now to either back up or potentially even migrate your entire, or part of your production environment from on-prem into AWS, you can install Zerto, run it locally for, I'd recommend a couple of weeks. You can do it as short as a week. We want at least a full 7-day window, so we can see what a full business week looks like in terms of your IT usage, your writes, your backups, everything that happens in terms of a regular week. 2 weeks gives us an average to work with, but all that information gets reported back, and then you can log into analytics, take a look at that planner, and it'll say you need X amount of space, you need this much bandwidth, you need this many instances inside AWS to adequately take care of what you're running on-prem.
All right. So we're going to do some more, wait for these failover tests to actually happen. But,
So while we wait, if the viewers want to try it out, sort of do a hands-on, is there any way they can do that?
yeah, absolutely. So we have the Zerto hands-on labs. Let me see if I can plug them in here. But you can actually, you just sign up and feel free to jump in, and just, you can have access to all these many different instances of Zerto. So it's not just limited to just this here.
In fact, you're demoing out of the hands-on lab right now, right, Anthony? You're running the AWS hands-on.
And that's like honestly why it's so slow. It's just like, yeah, we're testing a failover. We're doing stuff that is coming from definitely a different provider. So let me ping this here.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure the viewers would love to get their hands dirty and try it out. That's how I learn. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that is definitely the best way to do so. So, all right. So a failover is actually testing. Let's see if this is any quicker. No, it doesn't. But the main part about Zerto, I think, is just this flexibility of doing so. And I mean, Bob, if, aside from the failover test itself, like what, I don't know, what have you seen from the DR perspective that a lot of people like about Zerto?
I think the biggest thing is, oddly enough, the biggest thing is the fact that they can log in first thing in the morning and take a look. If you right above where Anthony's mouse is at the moment, you'll see that actual RPO column. It's right underneath the new VPG. Now go back to the right, Anthony. Almost to the end there. There you go. Almost. No. Down.
Oh, the second last column.
Yeah, next to the last column, the actual RPO. And you can see how both of those are green. You can sort of make that out. I don't know what everybody's screen is like, right? On my screen, it's kind of small, but it shows 7 seconds and 3 seconds for RPOs, and bright green. The users that live and breathe with this every day. We've got a customer that's used Zerto now for nearly a decade, and it's a quote that we use all the time in meetings. They're actually all over our literature, but the quote is, I log into Zerto first thing in the morning. If everything's green, I know I'm going to have a good day. And it's just peace of mind, right? That, and now they can test their plan. Same customer used to take a full weekend and 5 employees to go through their disaster recovery plan. 1 employee does it in an hour and a half on Sunday morning by themselves now, from their kitchen table with a cup of coffee, watching the news. And all of their compliance documentation gets printed out when they're done, and they can trot that out for senior management at any given point in time and say, all right, look, see, we're good to go. And they've actually had the need to fail over a couple of times in a disaster type situation, and it just changes. It's a game changer.
Right.
Yeah, I think you bring that point up pretty good. And just to stress on the importance of disaster recovery, we have a saying here at AWS: prepare for failure, and then you'll be prepared for failure. And then that's essentially why we want, as a business, you want to make sure that you're always up, almost always up. So you have to use these means, any means possible, to make sure that the downtime is as low as possible.
Exactly. Oh,
Awesome, guys. So
yeah, what we're seeing at the moment is the rehydration process, and that can take a little bit of time. The RTOs, with in AWS could be 15-20 minutes with a specific VM.
Yeah, and then but still, to be sitting here and just waiting, 1 hour for this to come back online is just way different than anything else. So we're almost done with this test failover, and then we're going to move into just I don't know, just everything else with Zerto itself. So we already backed up a file system to let me pull it down to our AWS bucket. So let's go S3.
So actually, while we wait for everything to test failover, do we is there any way this can be faster? The rehydration process, maybe.
Yeah. Well, we have a VPN absolute direct connect from on-premise to there. But if you were to actually do this, it would be outside of our lab environment significantly faster than what's going on right now.
So, in terms of functionality, just a curious question. Let's say I'm running on-prem a database on the VMs. Is there any way I can, instead of EC, like backing it up or basically creating a disaster recovery solution on EC2, I can directly do that on native database like RDS service?
You mean like move from an on-prem SQL server to?
Yes.
Yeah, no, not today. Not today. This is a VM to VM solution, as opposed to. I get asked all the time if we do physical. We don't do physical. They're like, I want to do physical to virtual machine. There are a lot of tools out there to do physical to virtual today. And then not too long ago, in fact, somebody from AWS was like, "Can I go from a virtual machine to Kubernetes?" I said, "So you want to?" I said, "Everybody wanted physical to virtual. Now we want virtual to container." But no, you can't do virtual to container today either.
The abstraction just keeps coming on.
Yeah. We do have a separate container product, right? Zerto Kubernetes, Z4K for short, because at Zerto, we like our acronyms too, almost as much as AWS does, if you've been listening to Anthony. So we do have a Z4K solution that will work with your Kubernetes containerized applications. And that's basically DR as code. Functions a lot like what you're seeing here in terms of functionality, but it works at the code level instead of at the virtual machine level.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Right, and that's kind of cool too. So we are very close with EKS. We at least the most recent version that we're pretty much kept up to, but from a Zerto perspective, so you can do the same thing through the CLI from a Kubernetes perspective also, and eventually once this failover test actually clears, you'll see the fact that you can make sure that everything, just from a case perspective, is operationally okay before you actually commit to that failover.
So
All right.
you mentioned Z4K. How does that I mean, I understand the basics of Kubernetes, container orchestration and all of that, but how does Z4K have access to other containers or other pods or other jobs that are running inside a Kubernetes environment to
Yeah,
actually back it up to, yeah.
absolutely. So, from a Z4K perspective, before we go back into this, it's basically whatever pods you annotate and the containers within them. So, as long as it's a persistent volume, the config maps, the secrets, anything like that, we're able to, through like a YAML file, you annotate which ones you want to protect. And then Zerto for Kubernetes is able to do the same thing from this perspective to give you that checkpoint-based rollback point in time too. So EKS, obviously a huge uh, sort of Kubernetes service that we support. And you can do so whether that's locally to replicate and then roll back to, or within different regions. So
It's fairly similar to how we handle it at the VM level, right? You've got a virtual manager that manages all of your individual data movers, and then we push data movers out into the individual pods and stuff. A lot like the VRAs and individual hosts that you'll see on your VMware environment.
So I remember initially you mentioned that using Zerto DR solution, you can also create a backup disaster solution from AWS to your on-prem solution.
Mm-hmm.
So how would that work? Is it exactly in reverse of what we saw today, or is it different mechanism?
no. Yeah, same thing. So once eventually this actually fails over test to AWS, what we'll do is you have an option to create what's called a reverse protection sort of group. So what that will do is keep the data store on premise with the same data that it has. And then when you fail over to AWS, it'll be an EC2 instance plus the EPS volumes. So yeah, you have the flexibility through this interface in order to move between both. But yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, and yeah. Eventually, once you finish yours, we'll take a look at it. But yeah, any other questions overall from the group?
I mean, I was thinking about like, yeah, we failed over an EC2 instance. That's great, or like a VM to an EC2 instance, but like they're obviously not going to be on the same IP address. So how
Yeah.
does Zerto handle the network routing? Does Zerto handle all of the that stuff, or would you recommend just like using something else, or using something like Route 53 that does it for you?
Nah. So I would recommend Zerto itself. So that's what's really cool about our product. All right. So yeah, you can roll back to a very specific point in time. That's all awesome. Okay, click next. All right. So when you create a VPG, you can actually say, like I showed before, the IP address that you want to fail over to. So that makes sense. Right?
Yeah, you can specify the IP address for the now. If there's specific routing out there, tables that need to be taken care of,
Yeah,
that's something you're probably going to have to do manually, and you could use something like Route 53 to resolve that. I mean, because if you're moving production from one place to another, there's going to be some routing changes in there, right? Obviously.
Yeah, but like if you're looking to actually like set a private IPv4 address, like from your instance from this one, you can actually set it from Zerto itself. So like a lot of our like sysadmins and things like that love this feature because it allows them to sort of pre-network things. But a lot of the heavy lifting will come after the recovery happens, unfortunately.
Right, that makes sense. We're
All right,
testing the failover.
There we
yes. Oh my Lord. All right. So yeah, the only time when we demo is the only time this is slow, of course.
I'm telling you.
Yeah. Oh my God.
The demo gods are capricious.
Bob, I've done this demo 9 times before this, and of course not. All right. So we have the instance running. We're in, you can see North Virginia region. This is my place where I told it to spin up to. You can see the new social. It's called Test Recovery. Again, this is the IP. I don't know. This is the instance itself as an IP. It has everything that you need to actually log into it. But again, we're not actually going to, be logging into that instance. So we can say to Zerto, hey, look, it looks great. It's spun up in that region. It looks awesome. Let's close this test out. Let's say stop. And then let's go over to our monitoring tab. And this is literally the most favorite thing. Let's see. What we're looking for here is basically a nice report that Zerto generates once it's done that will say, hey, this is the VM I shut down. This is how long it took to shut down. This is the EC2 instance we spun up. This is the instance details that we used to spun up. So for a lot of sysadmins, a lot of people that are using this failover technology, will be able to actually show to their boss, hey, this is how long stuff took. This is our SLA, and this is what we can promise back to our end users, which is huge. So this is from both on-premise to AWS itself, and then how do we restore it back from on-premise?
So does it also list down what files were backed up, let's say, on a particular VM?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll show you the PDF
Mhm.
very specifically once it generates. But yeah. So it's interesting.
So, I mean, how long? I mean, I haven't done anything like this manually. Thankful enough to live in the cloud world, but how long would doing something like this take? In a data center or like in an actual corporate
Yeah,
scenario?
no. That's a fair question. Like, and again, it goes back to honestly what you're protecting, right? If you're protecting file systems that have terabytes of data, honestly, it's going to take you fucking hours. It's going to take you hours of it happening, right? You hours. But like when you come back to like kind of tasks like this, it'll be minutes or seconds. Like from an operational perspective, that's what we really kind of strive ourselves on.
So we're saving the operations team a lot of time creating these
Yeah,
reports.
a lot.
Yeah. And if you contrast this with folks that are using some type of a backup recovery system as opposed to a DR recovery system,
Right.
you're going to bring up snapshots that are more than likely mismatched as far as time frame is concerned. It's going to take a long time to get those to work together because you're going to have to try and piece things in there. So it's not just a matter of the fact that you're giving up days in terms of that's when my snapshot was taken. You're giving up precious hours and maybe days bringing your environment back online and putting it back into a working order, as opposed to with Zerto, where every single checkpoint is matched across all of the virtual machines. So when I say I want it to come back up at 10 a.m. in the morning, I want that checkpoint. All of the servers come up at that timestamp. So all of the data is matched across, no matter how many servers are in that VPG. An application may run off 2 servers. It may run off 25 servers.
Right.
They all work the minute you bring them up. And Anthony didn't log into that server when we did that test failover. You can get really granular with your testing if you need to. If your corporate requirements are such that you have to prove that the application works, that is absolutely a functional application at that point in time. You can log into the application, run reports from within the application, prove that the application is functional because it is.
Right, and this is something you would do using like the post launch script or whatever, if you wanted to automate it so far, yeah.
You could potentially do that. Absolutely. Yeah.
No, that's awesome, yeah.
All right, let me see if I can get like the report in particular, recovery reports. Yeah, so there we go. This is our like social media website that we just failed over. And I know, like in reality, it looks like it took like a long time. But honestly, like if you're a sysadmin, what the heck did like 23 minutes, like 25 minutes take? Honestly, nothing. Right. There you go.
It's
go
It's
to
painful when you're demoing it, but
right.
Yeah.
It is
when it's a
because
live
everything
thing, you're
was
going,
slow.
this is fast.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, honestly, there would be more to this if it was not just such a simple application, but the fact that you can see step by step through this table, through a report, what is going on from a migration perspective, right? This was just a failover, but we can move. We can do the same thing through a move perspective, like through a move, uh, you know, uh, command also. So it's just like, did it really take that long? No. From a backup side of things, no. 4 hours compared to 30 minutes, not really. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
So for viewers out there that are thinking about migrating from, an on-premise data center into AWS cloud, and you're thinking it's going to be painful,
nah, this
well,
is it.
think about what you just saw and click the move button, and your application's back up and running in a completely different place 25, 30, 35 minutes later.
Right. Exactly. So I just hit the move button in particular. You can force shut down the VM on premise. You can enable reverse protection. So, hey, we want to keep the data store of everything that we've just moved to the cloud on premise too. You can set that here. Boot order. If there's multiple VMs within that VPG that you want to start up first, you can sort of put that ahead of time. So it's not like just a DR strategy or anything like that. It's like a legitimate, tool that you could very much use.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. Like, it's not just a move to the cloud that's taking this 35 minutes. You have this all these added features. You can
Mm-hmm.
make it immutable. You can set some lifecycle policies on it. You can set your order on which server gets backed up first. So it's a one bundle, one thing bundle, everything bundled up in one package.
Yeah,
In this 23 minutes.
absolutely. All right. So that's a recovery report. I didn't get to log into the instance, but this is basically within AWS itself. You have a same thing that you have on premise from a dashboard perspective. So if you're failing over and your site is completely down in on premise in real life, it doesn't matter. You can just use the AWS ZCA instance to start these failover operations and move back and forth. Um, so yeah, I'm upset about the extended journal. Granted, we have about 20 minutes left, so you could restore from that specific point in time that I showed you guys, and just bring like this file system that was here on premise back down. So again, a lot of compliance people. If you have files that your government agencies need to have locally, you can use Zerto to just quickly shoot it off to an S3 bucket, bring it back down when we need to, and you can set schedules and things like that when that stuff is required. But from the operational perspective, I wish it showed it a lot better, but that literally minutes of RPO and RTO. So I can recover from, hey, I'm a VM on premise here, and I can replicate to an EC2 instance in the cloud like that. And we don't have to worry about any of the orchestration or BS on the back end.
Yeah, and the beauty is the data was up to date basically 3 seconds until you
Right,
hit that click failover
Right.
button. At
right.
that point, it was just like, okay, now we're moving to the cloud. It's gonna take 20 minutes. That's your downtime. You just have to live with that.
Yeah.
And that's specifically in this case.
And that's assuming something goes wrong in your data center and you need to move right now. We talk about the man-made disasters that we kind of alluded to start this with, right? Ransomware. Figure out where you were, where you were penetrated in terms of time. 5 seconds before that, fail over to it. Drop all that into a sandbox, do whatever remediation you need to do, and then roll it into production. And you're right back up and operating. You didn't give anybody a red cent.
Yeah. I think the also one beauty of this whole solution is that, as you mentioned earlier in the like in the during the demo, you can have separated like DR solution, DR testing for your test environment, for your staging environment, for your prod environment.
Hmm.
So it's not basically now previously as you had to do these three tasks. Now you can sort of prioritize these tasks and have them together as well.
Yeah, yeah, and you're extending your data center is really what you're doing, right? You're leveraging AWS for a whole bunch of different things with regard to your DR strategy, your test development strategy, which allows you, I mean, if you're not going to make a move 100% to the cloud, it allows you to pare down what you are running on-prem and make use of AWS resources to resolve all those things that you were currently keeping a bunch of separate hardware for.
Also, I see several dogs in Anthony's background. Do you want to tell a story about them?
You see a dog? Yeah, I got my doggy here, so
You brought your dog to the bunker?
I did. Gotta keep him safe. But yes, no, yeah, and it was it's very interesting to see how Zerto, particularly from an on-prem perspective, is able to do this sort of translation from VMs to actual EC2 instances. So that's what makes us very much unique, and it's cool to see. You know, I'm glad to show you guys in real time. So,
You've got a fan in chat,
oh, good.
Anthony.
All right. So cool. Yes. Unfortunately, it's going to take some time, but for those out there, if you're an SA, if you're just tuned in and you're a customer, this Zerto will honestly really help you from a lot of perspectives from a DR as well as migration. So it'd be cool to reach out to us, me and Bob, if you have any questions.
And, we're coming to the marketplace relatively soon. When I say relatively soon, I have hopes of, the next couple of weeks. And that'll be our Zerto in cloud product, which is what provides DR within AWS, right? What you just saw demoed was the traditional Zerto product, which does from on-prem to AWS. Think about the same thing for your production loads in AWS to DR between regions or ACs. And that is going to be available in the marketplace fairly shortly.
Yeah, and I'll be doing a demo on that too. And then from the EKS perspective, if you guys are looking to replicate from Kubernetes side between regions, we have a lot of great tools that can do that granular level of rollback. So very excited to share that.
Awesome. Yeah, and if we have any new viewers coming up as joining the stream, I did paste the link to try for you to try out sort of like a hands-on lab of what we did today to see what kind of RPO and RTO numbers do you get. Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
But yeah, thanks again, Anthony and Bob. I think this was a pretty fun solution, and it's a pretty unique way to back up your on-prem solution all the way to the cloud and vice versa as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Alrighty. Thanks, everyone.